Whenever you hear the words original Medicare, this is what we're talking about. Parts A and B. It's your red, white, and blue card. Parts C and D, we've all heard of, but those things come a little bit later. We'll get to that in just a moment. But when you hear original Medicare, this is what we're talking about, parts A and B. The easy way to remember what parts A and B do, if you think of the letter A as standing for the word admitted. When you get admitted to a hospital or a skilled nursing facility, that's what part A does. It's considered your room and board. And as you can see at the bottom there, it covers a couple of other things as well, but generally we think of it as room and board. Part B is really the one that does all of the heavy lifting. It covers things like your doctors and specialists, any kind of labs, tests, surgeries, medical equipment. So Part B is the one that you're going to actually use the most. Now, that's what they do. What does it cost to have original Medicare? Many of you know this already. And keep in mind, these numbers that we're going to see are for 2025. It is insurance, and it does, tend to creep up a little bit each year. But for 2025, there is a thing called the monthly premium. And you're going to hear three insurance words. I'm going to explain what each one means. But I think most people appreciate the simple talk. So there's a thing called premium, and you attach the word monthly to that. That's what you pay. I jokingly say for the privilege of having insurance, you pay this monthly premium and you have insurance. Now, there's a premium for both parts A and B, but most people never pay a premium for part A because you had your working years, you paid in through payroll taxes. You had just a little bit deducted out of each check, and that prepaid for part A. You had to do that for 10 years or you had to marry someone who did. So you can actually get Part A on someone else's work record. Part B has a monthly premium in 2025 of $185 per month. And that's what it costs. And again, that does creep up just a little bit, slightly each year. So that's what it costs to have Medicare. What does it cost when things happen? And we're going to pretend for the next few minutes that there's no other kind of insurance. There's no VA healthcare. There's no Champ VA. There's no TRICARE for Life. There's no Medicaid, and there's no insurance companies involved. It's just your original Medicare, your red, white, and blue card. So this is how that works. So first of all, second insurance word. There's this thing called a deductible, and most people know what that means, but I never assume. A deductible is when your insurance is sitting back with its arms folded and it's saying, I'm not doing anything until you pay some money. Just like you have a deductible on your car or your home, if it gets damaged, you have to pay this deductible first out of your pocket. And once you've done that, then your insurance gets up to help you. There is a deductible for both parts A and B, and they're very, very different as you're about to see. So remember, the A is for admission. Let's talk about admitted to a hospital first. The deductible in 2025 will be $1,676. And it doesn't matter if that's for a day, a week, a month. It actually covers you for a full 60 days. So, and again, that's room and board. That's what your Part A does. So how does that work when you say this deductible can happen more than once in a year? Well, two possible scenarios. So first, let's imagine if you get admitted to a hospital, you have to pay the 1676 for your deductible. And then imagine that a clock starts ticking. So it's going to tick for 60 days. They're going to wind this clock up and it's going to go for 60 days. No matter if you're in the hospital for 1, 3, 10, 12 days, whatever, then you get discharged. This clock is still ticking back here. If you are out of the hospital and then you go back in while that 60-day clock, in other words, you're admitted twice within a 60-day period, you're okay. You don't have to pay again under Part A because you paid the 1676. But the other thing that can happen is that you're discharged after some random number of days and you are out of the hospital for a full 60 days. And then something happens and you have to go back in that year. Guess what? That's right, another $1,676 you have to pay again. So if you technically, if you take a calendar, break it up into a 12-month calendar, break it up into 60-day increments, that could happen 5 or 6 times in a single year. That would be pretty unfortunate. I don't know if that's ever happened to anybody, but if you have some serious things going on, it's not uncommon for that to happen more than once in a single year. So that's how that works for the first 60 days. Now, what happens if you're in the hospital beyond 60 days? That's called an extended stay. They're not real common, but back during when when COVID was in full swing, we did see some really long hospital stays. People were in there for months and months at a time. So on day 61, everything changes, and we have insurance word number three. It's called a copay. And I'm going to explain that because it can be confusing. A copay is always the part that you pay. So think of the first part of that word co. A co-pilot flies with the pilot. Co means with. So a copay means that you're going to pay with the insurance company. They're going to pay some, you're going to pay some. And the copay is always your part. So on day 61, you now have a daily copay because the 1676 did its job for the first 60 days. And now for the next 30 days, that copay is daily and it's $419. 419 a day times 30 days is a little over $12,000 under original Medicare if you don't have any other insurance. So that's a little bit scary. That can be pretty damaging to your finances. It actually gets a little bit better than that. And again, it's a rare scenario, but if you go beyond 90 days, on day 91, things change again. This is a special category. So I'm going to go hillbilly on you here for just a minute. We're going to talk about a 5-gallon bucket sitting over here. And in this 5-gallon bucket, we've got 60 additional days. They're called lifetime reserve days, meaning they're reserve days that have to last you the rest of your life. And there's 60 days in this bucket. Now, you only get into this bucket whenever you go beyond 90 days in the hospital. So the reality is probably most people never even touch that bucket of 60 extra days. But what if you did? So let's just for fun, what would it look like if you had a 5-month hospital stay? Months 1 and 2, $1,676. Month 3, a little over 12,000. In months 4 and 5, those reserve days, the daily copay is double. It goes to $838 per day. And that makes months 4 and 5 combined a little over $50,000. And that is enough to break most people. Fortunately, these are pretty rare scenarios, but they do happen. And they're what we call gaps in original Medicare. Medicare is very good insurance, but it's got some gaps where you can be left literally standing in the gap, digging in your pocket for some money that you may or may not have. So that's how that works. So if you remember, A is for admitted. The other place you can get admitted is a skilled nursing facility. And here's how Medicare handles that. They say, we will cover your first 20 days 100%. You won't pay a dime in a skilled nursing facility if you have a minimum 3-day hospital admission first. So you have to be fully admitted for a full 3 days. And then within the next 30 days, go into a skilled nursing facility. It can't be 2 months later. So we go in within the next 30 days, they cover the first 20 days. On day 21, you have a copay per day of $209.50. So about $210 for the next 80 days after Medicare is paid for the first 20. So, and they tell us, they're feeding us statistics all the time in this industry. And they say that the average stay in a skilled nursing facility is between 30 and 35 days. So you could be on the hook if you had a stay like that. If Medicare pays for the first 20, you could be on the hook for $2,000 to $3,000 there. So that's how Part A works. And Part B, actually, we're just about done. It's very, very simple. Part B, again, just a couple of reminders. It's the everything else category. It's the one that you're going to use the most. We don't want you spending your time in a hospital. Typically, people are seeing doctors and specialists and having tests done and things like that. So most of that stuff happens under Part B. Just another reminder, the monthly premium in 2025 is $185 per month. And if you remember, I said earlier, there's a deductible for both A and B, and they're very different. So they're different in two ways. The first way is the Part B deductible is much, much lower. It's only $257, as you can see. And the second thing is that $257 Part B deductible can only happen once per year. We call it a calendar year deductible. So it might be the first time that you go see a doctor or a specialist. Maybe you have some labs or some tests done. You'll pay, if you have original Medicare alone, you'll pay the first $257 out of your pocket. And then after you've done that, you've met your deductible for the year under Part B. And from that point on, the rest of the year, you have an 80/20 insurance plan. So anything that happens under Part B Medicare is going to pay 80% and you're going to pay 20%. Remember, when you're in the hospital, you got both A and B working because what does A do? It covers your room and board. But part B is everything else. Those doctors and specialists that come see you, if they send you down the hall to get an MRI or a CAT scan or an X-ray or they do an EKG, things like that, those are all under part B. So here's the big warning. In spite of the really big numbers we saw under hospitalization, we just saw those. Those are more rare situations. This 20% that you're responsible for is the largest gap, the largest potential financial risk in original Medicare. Why? Because it is unlimited. There is no cap. There's never a point when Medicare is going to step in and say, hey, we see you've really been paying a lot of 20% on this and that, and this really looks like it's stacking up. We'll take it from here. We got your back for the rest of the year. They don't do that. That 20% can go as high as the sky is high. So the first thing you think of is we all think of a story, we've all heard a story of someone who had a long hospital stay, had something catastrophic, open heart surgery, and they walked out of the hospital with a bill for 50 or $100,000 or even more. Imagine most of that being under Part B, which it would be. You know, a doctor's fee for a quadruple bypass can be over $200,000. That's Part B. Imagine having to come up with 20% of that. That's enough to break a lot of people. You know, you've heard of someone with $100,000 medical bill. $20,000 for most people is not easy to come up with. So that's why two things. You have to have something besides original Medicare to put a stop to those potential losses if you have a catastrophic year. And it's also why you don't want to just have original Medicare alone. You see a lot of people suggesting that you do that. It's a bad idea because if you have a catastrophic year, it will be catastrophic not only for your health, but also for your finances. So just a quick review, everything here on one screen, the gaps in original Medicare and what things cost. And then finally, that's it. That's how original Medicare works, part A and B. And hopefully that made things a lot less confusing and made it easier to understand for you. Thanks for watching.